Hi, this is Lindsay, one of the co-hosts of Beauties and Headcanons. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Tiana Vanderhei here, host of the Refined Redhead podcast on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast. Once you're done with this episode, you should definitely come check out my show, the Refined Redhead podcast, where we talk to real people about relevant information in hopes of inspiring you to chase after whatever dreams you've set out to accomplish, persevering through whatever obstacles are in your way. A new show comes out bi-weekly every Tuesday, so don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of the Refined Redhead podcast. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Throughout history, the course of sports has been shaped by one thing: the fans.
From the moments you never dreamed of,
Bobby Womack has saved the USA's life in this World Cup! Paul, the runner! Loose ball! It's good! Gonzaga! The flipper still fits!
To the moments that still give you nightmares.
Behind the bag! It gets through Buckner! Here comes Knight and the Mets win it! He's in! Patriots win the Super Bowl! Brady has his fifth!
through the good and the bad, fans have helped change the games we watch and the players we love.
They may not be the most logical people.
You are a factory of sadness! I'll see you Sunday.
But they know their teams better than anybody.
They'll blow in the ninth.
You may not always see them, but you know where to find them.
After all, there's nothing quite like the view from the cheap seats.
Broadcasting is part of the Public House Media Network.
Grab a chair and enjoy all there is in
The cheap seats.
Welcome in once again to a beautiful Monday morning, way up high in the cheap seats on the Public House Media Network on this Monday, May 21st, 2018. Game 3 last night going decidedly to the Golden State Warriors in their first home game of this Western Conference Finals. The Las Vegas Golden Knights, the expansion team, heading to the Stanley Cup Final in their first season. There's so much going on. Justify a chance at another triple crown. There's a lot to get to on this jam-packed Monday morning here in the cheap seats. I'm Christian Heimel, usually joined by John Lauder, but John unfortunately had some scheduling issues this past week, so we welcome in another member of the Public House Media family and a new addition to this crazy group of people who like to talk about sports as much as we possibly can in the cheap seats. Keith Haney, co-host, by the way, if you guys listen to Public House Media, you've heard it. We play their commercial almost every single show here because it's a really fun show, and that is Coffee with Keith and Katie. So, Keith, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate the time.
Christian, thanks for having me on, man. Excited to be a part of the cheap seats.
And just so that you guys know, we're going to go through some programming changes here over the next couple of weeks. Keith is going to be sliding in on Wednesdays to join Max Wolpoff as Jeffrey Childs tackles some other personal endeavors, and we'll wish him the best of luck. But that's going to start next week. So Jeff and Max will do their final tandem on Wednesday, and then, Keith, you'll jump in. But real quick, for our fans who maybe haven't had a chance to really check in with Coffee with Keith and Katie, tell us a little bit about you and about the show.
Yeah, definitely. I started the show independently by myself. It was just Coffee with Keith, and I was just doing those shows by myself, and I got bored with that eventually. But, you know, my wife's name is Katie, so the alliterations still work there. So we did that independently for a while, and then Baxter, one of the leaders of Public House Media, brought us on to the network, and we've been doing the show. We just passed our 50 show threshold a couple weeks ago, so we're going strong. And it's just me and my wife talking about whatever we feel like talking about. A lot of the time it is sports, because I've always been a sports guy, and Katie is she's a tour guide at Wrigley Field, so she always has some cool stories to tell about awesome. The Cubs or Wrigley. So yeah,
that's awesome. One of my favorite shows you guys had was right near the Final Four, because you do this with Katie randomly. Is you'll like throw out random quizzes. You'll try to like stump her on something sports related, and you were talking about which guys, if they played they went to whatever college they were going to, and it was the Final Four colleges, and if they played basketball or baseball or something. It was a lot of fun. A lot of fun stuff there. So.
Yeah, it's usually called NFL or NBA, and I'll give her the name of 3 players, usually pretty well known, but she's not very great with players. So I can throw out a Russell Westbrook and she'll say NFL 9 times out of 10. So
there you go. Well, I also know she's a diehard Cubs fan because you had to talk her down off the ledge a couple weeks ago with Yu Darvish. So.
That's true. That's true.
as most. So let's get into the show here. And I don't know if you're one of those guys if you're one of those people who couldn't care less about horse racing, or if you're one of those people who for 3 Saturdays a year, that's it, you care and you think you know everything and you're going to bet on these races. But the Preakness this past week justify winning on what was a sloppy, disgusting day in Pimlico, Maryland. To now have 2 of the 3 legs of the Triple Crown, and in 3 weeks he's going to go for the second Triple Crown in 4 years here. First off, are you a horse racing guy at all, or is it just one of those things that you're kind of like, okay, cool, it kind of happened?
More of the latter. Okay, cool, it kind of happened. Of course I'll watch them. I watched the Kentucky Derby. I watched the Preakness, and so I see it. But when it comes to knowing who the best horse is and what the odds are, and really placing bets and everything, that's really not my cup of tea. But at the same time, it is very interesting to see what's going on here, because Baffert, his horses always do well. Yeah. And the last time a horse won a Triple Crown, it was a Baffert horse. So I'm not going to try to disguise this for knowing a whole lot about horse racing, but I do know Baffert, and I know that his horses always perform well. So, hey, why not this year as well, huh?
Yeah, I mean, he's a legend within the sport, and I used to, when I was in college, I covered the Belmont Stakes. I went to college out on Long Island where the Belmont Stakes is, and it was always fun to talk with guys like Bob Baffert and Nick Zito, those type of trainers who are just so talented, and for whatever reason seem to be the big names there. This is a lot of fun, but it's always interesting. I hear this argument every single year when we have these Triple Crown races, and I remember when ESPN did their 100 Greatest Athletes for Sports Century, and people got so mad that Secretariat was up there in the top 5. So the question really is, is this kind of an athletic achievement? Is this something impressive enough where it's literally just a horse doing what horses do, and that's run? I mean, are you in favor? Do you think that like a Secretariat or an American Pharoah could be considered one of the greatest athletes of all time?
I'll say yeah. Why not? Because that's the athlete in that particular sport. Mm-hmm. So if you want to make the argument that a horse is not an athlete, then you could also make the argument, is horse racing a sport or is it an event?
Right.
Is it something that the horses just naturally do? So is it really a sport, or are we just making it a sport by betting on it? And but I would say absolutely, you can put the horse in there as far as athletes are concerned. They're trained, mm-hmm. They train, and they go to compete. And hey, if you're better than the rest of them, good for you. You're an athlete in your given sport. I'll give it to them. Absolutely.
And then the question, of course, becomes, what about the jockey? The jockey is
right.
is he really an athlete? And this is what's amazing. There are some jockeys that have like 2,000 career wins, and this is something you could do, like a career you could have for like 30, 40 years. It's incredible to see some of these jockeys who are like 53 and are still racing, which is impressive. But that brought me. That brings us to our poll question here today. This is a little kind of tongue-in-cheek here because I always feel like we never care about the jockey. Like, does anybody remember who the jockey was of Secretariat or the jockey of American Pharoah and all that stuff? You know more about the trainer and the owner. So our poll question today, and you can vote on this by going to the Cheap Seats by Public House Media on Facebook. This is a little tongue-in-cheek here, but what is the least glamorous job in sports? Is it the least, I guess, or the least notoriety? Which gets the least amount of respect? A jockey of a Triple Crown winning horse, or the caddy of a Grand Slam winning golfer. So, the jockey of Justify or the caddy of Tiger Woods? What's the more thankless job or the least respected job, do you think? Considering that as much as they may not have everything to do with what's happening, they still have a lot to do with the outcome of those particular sports.
Yeah, I would say the caddy of Tiger Woods is definitely the more thankless job, because at least they interview the jockey after they win the race. Nobody's interviewing the caddy after Tiger Woods puts on that green jacket. You know, at least the jockey gets 30 seconds as he's riding the horse into the into the winner's circle.
That's
there.
interesting. I didn't actually think about that. See, I was going to say the jockey because I don't know what their cut of the pay is. I know a lot of it goes to the owner and the trainer. I don't know what their cut of the prize money is. I know caddies get 10% of the winnings, and they have all their meals and travel paid for. So that seems like a pretty decent job as far as I'm concerned. Now, I wanted to add a third into this, but Facebook won't let us. We can only have two options on a poll question. I wanted to add in catcher of a perfect game or no-hitter, because that almost never gets talked about. Like, for instance, Jason Varitek. I grew up a Boston Red Sox fan, so I love Jason Varitek. He's not a Hall of Fame catcher, but he's caught 4 no-hitters from 4 different pitchers. Like, that is a pretty impressive stat, and yet he won't get into the Hall of Fame simply because of that. So, and this is,
and to prove your point, I did not know that stat. So that just proves your point.
Yeah, like so. I mean, I feel like the catcher probably would have been a runaway if we had put him in there with one of this. But considering what we've got, you know what? I think I might have to go with you. I'd agree with you on the caddy part, because you're right. They don't get. Caleb Haney's not getting interviewed. The only reason we know who Steve Williams is because he wrote that book after he stopped being the caddy for Tiger.
Sure.
So, yeah, I think I might have to go with you on this one. Well, listeners, you let us know what you think. What's the more thankless job or the least respected job in sports? Jockey of a Triple Crown winning horse or the caddy of a Grand Slam winning golfer? The Cheap Seats by Public House Media on Facebook. You're in the Cheap Seats. Christian Imel, Keith Haney here with you on the Public House Media Network. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, review, Google Play, Apple Podcasts, TuneIn Radio, Spreaker.com, and, of course, thephmedia.com. And if you go there, you can get some awesome gear from the Cheap Seats or from my show, Press Row, Keith's show, Coffee with Keith and Katie. There's a whole bunch of awesome stuff up there. Check it out. Share it with your friends and family, and help support the show. One other thing I want to get to here in this first segment here before we really get into the NFL playoffs, and don't worry, we will talk about that because it's the only thing everybody's talking about. The ACC brought this up late last week. I think it was Thursday or Wednesday. The ACC is planning to propose legislation in the spring meetings to expand the NCAA basketball tournament from 68 to 72 teams. I don't understand why we need to. I didn't like the expansion to 68. The first 4 is nice. It helps Dayton, which is a great basketball town if you've ever been. But now they want to probably add another one and maybe do it. This makes no sense to me, and I don't really like the idea of it.
Yeah, the question that came to my mind when I read that is why? Yeah. Why do we need 72 teams? The idea of 68 teams making it into the NCAA tournament makes the regular season for so many viewers kind of obsolete. Mm-hmm. So many teams are naturally going to be in the tournament. How many, quote unquote, diehard Duke fans really watch and ride on every dribble of that basketball during the Duke season? They're going to win 20 games. They're going to get into the NCAA tournament, and then you're going to start watching. So I think the more you add teams to the bracket, it really kind of waters down the regular season, at least to me.
I agree with you, because here's the thing. I like the idea when they expanded to 68, because I'm like, if those 4 teams are those mid-majors that make those mid-major regular season conference champions that lose in their conference tournament, and they don't have that automatic qualifier, and you can get more of those teams in, because that's what March Madness is about. 2 things. It's about which Cinderella do you really care about, and it's about the blue bloods: Kansas, Kentucky, Duke, UCLA, Michigan State, those type teams. But if you're not going to put more mid-majors in, then you kind of lose that luster, and it just becomes a money grab for the big schools and the big conferences. So it's no surprise to me that the ACC is doing this. But if you increase it to 72 teams, that's 20% of Division I basketball teams. 351 Division I teams, 20% of them would make it into the NCAA. Not to mention the NIT, the CBI, and the CIT postseason tournaments, which we forget about, but they still exist and are a bigger insult to most schools when they get invited to the CIT or the CBI. So this is a money grab for, like, for instance, Georgia Tech to get into the conference tournament as opposed to Loyola Chicago if they didn't win their automatic qualifier. So I don't really like it that much.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. Those extra spots are not going to get those mid-majors, and it's going to get that. It's going to get that sixth place team in the Big Ten or the ACC or any of those other big conferences. That's what it's for. So I absolutely agree with everything that you're saying on that. I'm not for it, and hopefully they keep it at 68 to where it is.
Would love to keep it at 68. Now, there was a thing, reading this article about it on ESPN.com, the ACC, I don't know why this isn't getting more news, the ACC is also going to propose specific rule changes about widening the lane, which I could really care less about, resetting the shot clock to 20 seconds after an offensive rebound, and moving the three-point line back. So there may be more changes to the actual game of college basketball than we're expecting here in the next couple of weeks. We'll see what happens, though, as they have their spring meetings. Plenty more still to come. When we return, Steph Curry woke up in a big way last night for the Golden State Warriors. The shimmy is back, and it could mean doom for the Houston Rockets. And then tonight, how big is Game 4 for the Boston Celtics in Cleveland as they try to take a 3-1 lead over LeBron and company? Keith Haney sitting in for John Lauder. I'm Christian Heimel. You're in the Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network.
This is Sam Kirby, host of Cinema Stories here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Cinema Stories, where we hang out and just talk movie and TV news and reviews, and it's awesome. A new show comes out every single Tuesday. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Cinema Stories. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Welcome back to the Cheap Seats. Christian Heimel, Keith Haney here with you on the Public House Media Network. Don't forget to check out our Facebook page, The Cheap Seats by Public House Media. Vote on today's poll question. I don't know the right way to word it. The least thankful, the least notoriety,
the most
glamorous,
thankless,
job in sports. Yeah, that might be the way to go. Jockey for a Triple Crown winning horse, or the caddy of a Grand Slam winning golfer. Basically, do you want to be the guy who's riding Justify or the one who's carrying Tiger Woods' clubs? That's basically, who would you rather be kind of thing. So let's get into it. Keith, big game yesterday, and this was kind of what we were all expecting. I think when Golden State got home that they were going to really show up and show out, and not only did they, but Steph Curry went off last night. I think he was, 4 for 5 from downtown after halftime, finished 5 of 12, 35 points, went 7 for 7 in the third with 18, and the Warriors obliterate Houston 126-85 in Game 3.
Yeah, it was, as you said, it was the Steph Curry show, and that's exactly what we were expecting as they went back to Golden State. You said it right, 35 points in 34 minutes, 6 rebounds, only 1 assist for Steph, but I imagine you don't have a lot of time to pass the ball when you're taking those shots, but hey, they're falling for him. And Kevin Durant too, 25 points on the night, 6 of 6 rebounds in 35 minutes, and everybody came to play for Golden State. Obviously, Steph, he's getting the headlines, but everybody played a part. Thompson, Green, Iguodala, Durant, all in double digits, with Livingston coming off the bench with 9 points as well. So, hey, everybody played a part in that thrashing 126-85.
How about Draymond Green? 17 rebounds and 6 assists in his 37 minutes, a plus 26. looking at the box score, every one of Golden State's starters had a plus-minus above 20, better than plus 20. Klay Thompson was the worst starter last night at plus 21 for the Golden State Warriors. By contrast, not a single person. The best starter for the Houston Rockets was Clint Capella at a minus 10 on the plus-minus.
Yeah.
And look, if you're going to beat the Rockets, you're going to do it. You got to do two things. Number one, you got to make sure that James Harden can't shoot, and you got to make sure that Chris Paul can't distribute. And they did that last night. James Harden, 7 of 16 shooting, only had 20 points to lead Houston, but Chris Paul just 4 assists for a guy who is just supposed to be such a talented point guard.
Yeah, and that's a mismatch, and that's the big thing with the NBA. It's all about matchups, and Houston, they're just not matching up well right now with Golden State, and that's really what it comes down to. Chris Paul, as you said, he needs to distribute the ball better. He needs to find those guys on the outside. Cut to the basket a little bit, and then once you get that attraction, then dish it out to somebody. He's not finding those open looks, and that's really what he needs to do to get his other guys like James Harden some open shots so they can knock it down from behind the arc, because the teams that hit the 3-pointers, they're the ones that are going to win. And you know what? Golden State's been doing that.
Yeah, and I tell you, I know a lot of people give Kevin Durant flack for leaving Oklahoma City, but these 2 years in Golden State, when Steph Curry has struggled, Kevin Durant has looked like the best player in basketball. And that was again yesterday during the first half. Curry struggled in the first half a little bit. He was 1 for 7 from three-point land yesterday, making through the first 2.5 games of this series, he was a total of 3 for 20 from downtown in these first 2.5 games, and then he goes off for 4 or 5 in the second half. Curry Kevin Durant, meanwhile, was going nuts and continuing to dominate no matter what. 9 of 19 shooting, doing everything he can from outside, driving the basketball. And I thought in the second half it was really interesting to watch Steph Curry change the way he played. He didn't start trying to shoot all those threes. He had 18 points in the third quarter. Only 2 of them were 3-pointers. Everything else was driving to the lane, that incredible floater that he has, those step backs, those layups, just scoring in different ways. And that's what great scorers do. They find ways to put the ball in the basket from multiple spots on the floor.
Yeah, that's what it's all about. It's all about distributing the ball. And really, when you talk about teams that have won championships in the past, you always have that 1-2 combo. You have Kevin Durant and Steph Curry. Can go back to the obvious 90s, Pippen and Jordan. Yep. And when Cleveland was able to come back from down 3-1 and beat Golden State, it was LeBron and Kyrie. And Kyrie. Yeah. So that's what you need. You really need those 2 superstars. And Kevin Durant, he had that with Russell Westbrook. They were just missing, that one other piece. But that was also a combo that could have won a championship if they weren't trying to play Golden State. So really, with Kevin Durant and that Steph Curry combo, that's really hard to stop.
I thought another interesting thing about this game yesterday was that Clint Capella, 13 points and only 8 rebounds. He's a guy who's just 1 block. He's been a defensive force for this Houston team all year long. Only 4 defensive rebounds. When your point guard, Chris Paul, is leading the team in defensive rebounds with 9, that's not good. Chris Paul had more defensive rebounds than Clint Capella had total rebounds. So clearly they found a way to knock some things around and disrupt him. And the bench has to be better. Lukumba Mute, which I cannot believe I just said that name correctly. That was awesome on one
That was nice.
He really played 15 minutes, 3 points, 1 rebound, just wasn't there. This is why guys like Draymond Green, it's insane. It's a super team. It's the most super team there has ever been. It's a dream team in one place. Draymond Green is one of the best power forwards in the game, and he may go down as the best ever eventually. I don't know how much longer he's going to have to play to be able to pass Tim Duncan, but he's playing incredible well because of how many different positions he can play. Kevin Durant at small forward who can handle the point is unfair. Klay Thompson and his shot is just not okay. Andre Iguodala, who has found a career resurgence there, and then of course Durant, and Curry. I mean, they're perfect at every single position, and they've done it defensively too in this series, which has really been impressive to me.
And to speak to Draymond Green once again, with those 17 rebounds, talking about the Rockets and their problems with rebounding in the game, as you said, Chris Paul leading the team as a point guard in rebounds with 10 rebounds. That really goes to show how physical Draymond is willing to be down low. And everybody talks about, nowadays in the NBA that you can't touch anybody. Nobody wants to really rough it up as they used to. And Draymond Green, he's always had those, problems, with being too physical. But when you're the type of player that Draymond Green is, when you're not afraid to really get in the mix down there, you're going to help your team win with those 17 rebounds, and that's exactly what he did. But to speak to the rest of everything that you said, this is an unbelievable Golden State team. Yeah, as you said, this is a super team.
It's unbelievable, and I think this pretty much we're hoping. I think after Game 1, the way that Houston lost that game, and I said this before. I said this last week. I said I believe that Houston had the advantage, and I felt Houston would be a team that would win this series, but they had to win Game 1. I felt like Game 1 was a must-win because that mental, knockout of losing that first game at home and immediately losing home court advantage against this Golden State team was going to be too much, and it looks like that might be the case. I said it last week, and I believe it here. I think Golden State wins the next 2 games, and they take it in 5, honestly, in this series, and head on to their 4th straight NBA Finals.
Yeah, I would agree, and that Game 1 is always so important. I mean, obviously, that sets the tone, and if you go down at home in a series 1-0, everything is different. You think to yourself, well, there goes our home court advantage, and you're automatically playing from behind. And sure, Houston, they come back in Game 2 and they have a convincing win against the Warriors. But the Warriors are still in control because even after a disappointing Game 2, they have a home game in Game 3 where they're able to take that advantage right back. No team is going to be fresh off of a plane trip. So it's really you have to win that Game 1, and Houston losing that Game 1, I think you said it best. That really played a role in how Houston viewed this series.
One road team really struggling last night. Another road team that really struggled in Game 3 was on Saturday. The Boston Celtics losing by 30 on Saturday to the Cavaliers in Game 3. Game 4 tonight. Obviously, everybody, the Celtics, all the players saying we need to do better. We need to be better defensively, especially against LeBron, Marcus Morris, Marcus Smart, both saying that they need to be better. The Cavaliers played really good defense on Saturday against Al Horford, which was certainly helpful, and LeBron James was a big part of it. The question is can LeBron and the Cavs climb back from down 2-0 and win another Game 4 to even up the series here tonight?
I don't think so, and I really give all the credit to Brad Stevens on that. After losing a game in the fashion that the Celtics just lost, Brad Stevens is such a great coach, and they always say you learn more from losses than you do for wins. I think he's going to have them ready, and no way do I think that Cleveland does to the Celtics what they just did in Game 3.
Yeah, and I'm really interested to see what James does, what happens with LeBron defensively, because he was so good on Saturday. Jaylen Brown has been a phenomenal player for the Celtics this postseason with the injuries to Kyrie and, of course, Gordon Hayward at the very beginning of the season. LeBron James, this is an insane stat here, guarded Jaylen Brown, and Jaylen Brown didn't score until there was 8 minutes and 20 seconds left in the second quarter on Saturday.
Whoa.
Also, when LeBron was guarding a Celtics ball handler, the Celtics were 2 of 10 with 4 turnovers when guarded by LeBron James. He played incredible defense. So if he does that again, it might be a little bit different. But I don't expect the Celtics to have the same struggles they did against Cleveland in that last game. When you look at the box score from Game 3, they really had a tough time doing honestly anything. I mean, rebounding-wise, they were out-rebounded 45-34. That's not good. They only shot 27% from three, 6 of 22. And like we were talking about with Golden State, the three-point ball is, it's win or lose. It's how it's live or die. And Cleveland just came out guns blazing at home in their first game, trying to get back out. And when you're up 15 after the first quarter, it's a little hard to come back from it. I do think the Celtics bounce back. I'm not confident enough to call it a win tonight for them, but I do think they play a lot better because they've struggled on the road this postseason. And the important thing, unlike Houston, the Celtics still have their home court advantage because they won those 2 games in Boston.
Right. And the Celtics, I think, as any team does, going up 2-0 really quick, I think, it's natural to, I wouldn't say get complacent, but you get a lot more comfortable with what you're doing, which cannot always be a positive, obviously, considering what Cleveland did to them in Game 3. But the Cavaliers, they were ready to go in front of their home crowd. Game 3, they really needed that when they needed it much more than the Celtics did. So I think the Celtics were much more comfortable, not really pushing the envelope when Cleveland really needed to do that. But again, I think the Celtics, they learned a lot from Cleveland. They saw what Cleveland can do. I don't think they underestimated LeBron James by any means, because I don't think any team can do that. But I think after seeing what LeBron did do in Game 3, that gives them the option to go back to the drawing board and see, all right, how else can we, not stop LeBron, because you're not going to stop him, but how else can we contain him and make him less effective?
I mean, and 12 assists is huge. I mean, he had 12 assists in Game 3. He's been their best passer, their best scorer, their best defender throughout these playoffs. He's basically carried this entire team. And the Cavs aren't going to shoot 50% from three or 49% from the floor again. And the Celtics aren't going to shoot as poorly as they did on Saturday. So I do think they get a little bit better tonight. I don't know. It's tough for me as a Celtics fan. Like, I don't know if I can call a win in Cleveland because of how bad they've been in the postseason. I just can confidently say that if they lose Game 4, they will win Game 5 at home. And as long as Game 7's at home, I'm still confident that they win this series.
Yeah, I have the Celtics. So I would say that the Celtics win in 6. I think, I'm not sure how I want to go. I really think Boston is going to win Game 4 tomorrow. Maybe Cleveland gets Game 5 after another loss, but I really don't think this is going further than 6, and I think the Celtics are going to represent the East.
All righty. Well, you got Game 4 tonight here against Celtics and Cavaliers. That one coming up a little bit. We have still trying to figure out who is going to be in the NBA Finals. We have one team that has already clinched their spot to play for a championship trophy, and it is a team in their first year of existence. We'll talk about the Vegas Golden Knights, and is their success this year good for hockey, good for the sport, and as well as some guys talking a little smack. That everybody wants respect when it comes time for the NBA draft. We're going to talk about a couple guys who are claiming they're already should be the number 1 overall pick. Keith Haney sitting in for John Lauder. I'm Christian Heimel. This is The Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network.
This is Nicole Kelly, host of Loud and Proud here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Loud and Proud, where we talk about issues facing the disability community. A new show comes out weekly. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you never miss an episode of Loud and Proud. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
Yeah, cash money, heroes, private jets, polish, they shot. I look up to the sky, and now the world is mine. I've known it all my life. I made it. I used to dream.
Welcome back in the Cheap Seats. You made it all the way up here. A lot of steps to get all the way up here to the Cheap Seats, but it's nice. The view is always good here. The beer's always cold. That's the important part. All the way up here. Christian Heimel, Keith Haney here joining us. Keith filling in for John Lauder. John will be back next week. Keith will be back next week as well, starting his tenure on Wednesday with Max Wolpoff. Looking forward to that and getting you guys involved. It'll be a lot of fun for us. Keith joining in as a new host here on the Cheap Seats. You can also catch him, Tuesdays and Fridays?
Mondays and Thursdays.
Okay, Mondays. I was completely wrong.
It was you're not completely. It was Tuesdays and Fridays, but we switched. So so I'm giving you credit for that one.
All right. So Mondays and Thursdays, you can catch him and his wife Katie, Coffee with Keith and Katie, and have a little bit of fun with that. You can also check me out on Thursdays, Press Row. You got a lot of stuff to check out on thephmedia.com. Learn about all of our hosts. Find all of our great shows. You just heard the commercial there for Loud and Proud with Nicole Kelly. We've got a number of the Refined Redhead, Beauties and Head Cannons, Verse of the Day. There are so many other ones out there. We really hope you guys check it out, thephmedia.com. You can also get some awesome gear there and support your favorite shows and your favorite hosts as well, if you have favorite hosts. I know that, you're not supposed to have favorites, I guess, anymore. But we certainly hope if you guys like us that you at least show it. Don't forget to go to our Facebook page, The Cheap Seats by Public House Media. Vote on the poll question. Most thankless. Is that what we're going with? Thankless? Yes.
Thankless, yeah.
Most thankless job in sports. Jockey of a Triple Crown winning horse or caddy of a Grand Slam winning golfer. So the guy who's riding Justify or the guy who carries the clubs for Tiger Woods. Speaking of thankless, I think a lot of people and players in their, as soon as they declare for a draft, whether it be the NFL or the NBA, you don't see it in the NHL or Major League Baseball because they're not really highly televised. But these players all feel like they don't get enough respect. They all feel like they're the most thankless player in the country or in the draft. And with the Phoenix Suns officially now having the number 1 overall pick, you're starting to see some of these guys jockeying for that number 1 draft status, to be that number 1 guy. Over the weekend, Keith, we had both Michael Porter Jr., the freshman out of Missouri, who played a total of, 3 games, I think, his freshman year because of a back injury, and Trae Young, the freshman from Oklahoma, both claiming that they are the best overall players in the draft and should be number 1 overall.
Well, that's nice. It's nice that they think that.
You would hope. I mean, seriously, though, in one sense or another, you actually kind of want these guys to say that. Don't you want them to believe they're the best there is?
Oh, of course. I think you really look for that swagger out of these guys because that has a lot to do with how you perform. To a certain extent, you don't want a guy that says, well, how do you think you are? Looking at this draft like, oh, well, I think I'm probably the 20th best player in this draft. So if I go anything higher than 15, I think that would be pretty good. You don't want a player that says that, even if that's the truth, because I think that's the truth for Trae Young. I think he's probably top 15. Top, maybe top 10, depending on how you want to look at it. But no way are you looking for somebody to say, yeah, I'm top 15, so if I go in the top 10, I'll be happy. You want your guy thinking he's the best guy because regardless of where you pick in the draft, if you're picking number 1 or if you're picking number 9, you think that's the smartest pick that you have at that time, and you think he's the best man for the role given the circumstances. So you want your guy thinking that he's the best. So is Trae Young the best in the draft? No, but I want him thinking he is if I'm going to draft him.
Yeah, and listen, I'm not upset with these guys saying it. I kind of believe Michael Porter Jr. more than Trae Young when they say that they're the best in the draft, that they should be the number 1 pick, simply because I understand Michael barely played because he was injured and he had a back injury, but I think if healthy, he has the potential to be that Kevin Durant style, that Giannis Antetokounmpo style player, Anthony Davis. I mean, he's not the size of AD, but he's got that length, he's got that outside shooting, he's got the ball handling, which is, maybe more of a Draymond Green type, which, again, as we talked about earlier, that's not a bad thing. I think everybody would love to have a Draymond Green on their team. Trae Young he scares me because great shooter, really good passer, led the nation in scoring and assists as a freshman, which is I don't think it had ever been done before. He was leading them all the way up until the very end. But the way that when he got into conference play and teams started to see him a second time and get film on him, he became really, really bad. And
they figured him out.
Exactly. So I'm a little concerned. That being said, he's a three-point shooter and he's a good passer, and that's all you need in this game now. So he's got a chance to be up there in the top 10, maybe the top 5. I still, for my money, my number one overall pick, and I hate to say it because I loathe Duke with every fiber in my body, but I still think Marvin Bagley Jr. or Marvin Bagley III is the number one overall pick in my opinion. But I mean, I know how much I loathe Duke, but I also bought a Jason Tatum jersey because I love me some Jason Tatum now that he's wearing a Celtics jersey and not a Duke one.
Yeah, and it all depends on where these guys are picked, too. Obviously, the team is going to pick to their needs, but depending on the players that they have around them and the guys that they have as the support staff right off the bat, that obviously plays a huge role in how these guys perform. Mm-hmm. So, you can be the most talented player, on paper and, do well in the NBA draft combine, but once you get on your team, it's really a matter of how you gel with the guys around you, the chemistry that you have with them. So, of course, that's impossible to know until those guys, get on the court with the teams that they're drafted. But you're saying Marvin Bagley. I really like Jaren Jackson Jr. out of Michigan State.
Yeah.
I think he's great. He did great for the Spartans this past year. Him and DeAndre Ayton. I think he's the number one overall projected now since the Suns got the number one overall pick. But for my money, I really think it's Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yeah, Ayton seems to make sense for a lot of people. But, I mean, Luka Doncic is going to be interesting here, the kid out of Europe, considering that the new Suns coach coached Luka Doncic over there. So be interesting to see the NBA draft coming up June 21st. We'll get into it as we get closer to it, obviously. You're in the Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network. Chris and I'm with Keith Haney here with you. As we mentioned, we're still looking for who is going to fight for the NBA championship. There's still technically 4 teams competing. One team has already clinched their spot in the NHL in the Stanley Cup final. Vegas Golden Knights, in their first year ever as an expansion team, winning 2-1 yesterday in Game 5, beating the Winnipeg Jets 4-1 in that series, and now they await Tampa Bay or Washington. Lightning lead 3-2 with Game 6 tonight. So we could know tonight who the Knights are facing. But, Keith, I mean, for my money, this is the best story in sports over the last year, the Vegas Golden Knights. And I think it's awesome, and I'm all in on Vegas winning the Stanley Cup. All in.
So am I. I think it's great for the sport. The second that they announced that Vegas was getting an NHL hockey team, obviously that was in the works for a while, but I love the idea, and I love that they're doing well. And they have a great team to not just be good this year, but to be good in the upcoming years as well. Anytime you have Marc-Andre Fleury in goal, I don't think you can get much more. You can get much more fortunate than the Golden Knights did, getting a 3-time Stanley Cup winner, between the pipes for you. But yeah, the Golden Knights, their story, and I would absolutely agree with you, it's the best story in sports, and it doesn't get the notoriety that it should because it's America and it's hockey, and it just doesn't get those headlines. But I think it's great for the sport being in Vegas. It's not really a hockey town, and although it's great to see those original 6 teams doing well, the Boston Bruins, the Blackhawks, the Wings, all those teams, those are the historically great teams that everybody recognizes, but it really expands the sport when you have not only an expansion team, but an expansion team in Vegas that is not known to be a great hockey city, and another team in Tampa Bay with the Lightning, a warm weather climate, and you don't think hockey when you think Tampa Bay. Right. So although it's not the big headline catcher that you're going to get, now with the Blackhawks and the Red Wings being in separate conferences, it's not that the Chicago Blackhawks and the Detroit Red Wings are playing for the Stanley Cup final, but hey, Vegas and Tampa Bay, I think that's great for the sport.
I agree with you there. Having teams in non-huge market, like people were all upset the Kansas City Royals made the World Series a few years ago. I'm like, no, that's great for baseball. To have those smaller markets or those places where you don't think they're not tremendous. Like, this is the insane part. The 4 teams in the conference finals, Tampa Bay, Washington, Vegas, and Winnipeg. Only one Stanley Cup between those 4 teams, and it was 14 years ago when Tampa Bay won the Stanley Cup. So that's awesome to me. I think that's great. I understand a lot of people are upset that an expansion team is doing this well. in their first year. You know, like, oh, they're not supposed to be this good. But you know what? They changed the expansion draft for this reason, to have a team be competitive so that the fan base didn't go away and there were empty seats, 10 days into the season because of how bad they were. So Golden Knights, just the second expansion team in the Big Four sports, hockey, NBA, NFL, or Major League Baseball since 1960 to reach the championship series in their first season. The other team, 1967-68, when the St. Louis Blues in their first season made the Stanley Cup final, but the NHL had 12 teams and 8 of them made the playoffs then. So not as difficult as it was for the Golden Knights. Awesome, love it. I think it's great. I'm so pulling for them. Vegas 2-0 against both Tampa Bay and Washington this year. There was a Vegas, the city actually released this parlay bet. You could bet right now, and you still can, Justify wins the Triple Crown and the Golden Knights win the Stanley Cup. You got to get both, but it's going off at a plus 260 right now. You put $100 down, you win 260. I might be calling Vegas after the show. I might be doing that because I don't know about Justify winning the Triple Crown, but I'm all in on Vegas winning the Stanley Cup this year.
Yeah, and completely besides the point. But what's been making the most headlines for Vegas is really nothing that they've done on the ice, and it's their pregame. It's their pregame show.
Awesome is that?
It's so good. I think I was listening to Mike and Tirico, and they said absolutely nothing about the hockey game, of course, but they were going on for a couple of minutes about the pregame, and I saw it on YouTube, and I kept watching them, and those are so great. So if you're not going for the hockey in Vegas, which you absolutely are now, hey, go for the show. But
yeah. How about this? A year ago, May 17, 2017, Marc-Andre Fleury gave up 4 goals on 9 shots in Game 3 of the Eastern Conference Finals against Ottawa and was pulled for Matt Murray. That was the last time he played for Pittsburgh. Of course, they went on to win the Stanley Cup.
Yep.
1 year, 3 days later, he's playing for the Stanley Cup for a 3rd straight year, just for a different team. That's pretty cool.
Wow.
I like it.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and I think that makes all the difference for a team like Vegas, where you have a bunch of guys that have never really played hockey together before with that expansion, and you need that leadership. You need that veteran leadership and somebody that's been there before. And Marc-Andre Fleury, he hasn't just been there before; he's been there very recently.
Yep.
So he's someone that you can trust to really act as a leader, and when you know that you have that leadership on the ice and that talent, in front of the goal, that's a winning combination.
Going to be a lot of fun. Game 6 tonight in the Eastern Conference Finals. Tampa Bay leading Washington 3-2. I'm not a huge hockey guy. I am. I mean, don't get me wrong. I love watching it, and I get really excited, especially come the playoffs. But I don't know enough to break it down for you. I'll be honest, though, just watching these games, I know the Capitals won the first 2, but it just feels like Tampa Bay. I mean, after Washington lost Game 3 at home, it started to feel like the tide turned for Tampa Bay, and I do think the Lightning close it out tonight.
Yeah, I think the Lightning do too. I'm in the same boat as you. I don't pretend to be a hockey expert by any means, but I do know that you have to have something more than one player, really being your go-to guy when you're on the ice. And that obviously, at least for me, that's Alexander Ovechkin. You need something else from other guys, from the Capitals. And Ovechkin, he's the guy that's been, and of course, he's the best player on the ice anytime, you step foot on it. But I really haven't seen a lot of bright points, from the Capitals in this series, other than the first 2 games. But Alexander Ovechkin played great for them.
Yep.
And he's been that one consistency, and you need you need 2 lines to be consistent if you're going to win the Stanley Cup, and the Capitals just haven't had that.
3 segments down. Got about 10 minutes left in the show. When we come back, we'll get into some headlines on the NFL, the new season of Hard Knocks. We know who is going to be participating in it. Is that such a good thing? Johnny Manziel has a new employer, and Terrell Owens can't believe that somebody still has a job. We'll get into that, plus our Mojo Monday. It's all coming up. This is The Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network.
This is Ryan Pierce, host of Completely Serious here on Public House Media. Thanks for listening to the following broadcast on Public House Media. Once you're done with this episode, I hope you'll come check out my show, Completely Serious, where we talk about sports and have fun with great guests. Don't forget to subscribe on iTunes so you'll never miss an episode of Completely Serious. Thanks again for checking out the following broadcast on Public House Media.
There are some songs that just take way too long to finally hit. You know, there's some that they're really nice songs, but they just take way too long to get into it. And I like Red Hot Chili Peppers and I like Can't Stop, but this song takes 35 seconds to get into it. You're waiting a while.
If you're waiting 35 seconds to get into a song, it's only 3 minutes anyway. That's 10% of the song, right there, pretty much.
Christian Heimel, Keith Haney here with you on the Cheap Seats on Public House Media Network. Keith, of course, joining us here, a little guest spot before he jumps in on Wednesdays with Max Wilpomp starting next week. We're excited for that. It'll be June 6th. It'll be your guys' first show together. So that'll be fun. Looking forward to is that June? Yeah, June 6th. Nope, sorry.
It's going to be the third. It's going to be May 30th, right?
Yeah, whatever that is. Yeah, that one. I can't remember, so I'm getting all my dates confused. It's all blending together at this point here. It's amazing that the NFL, Keith, can always find ways to stay in headlines even though they're not actually playing football. I've always admired their ability to do that, and we found out early Friday morning that the Cleveland Browns are going to be on Hard Knocks.
Great.
Yay? Yeah.
I think it's great.
Mark? Yeah, you do?
Well, why? It's going to be the brightest point that the Cleveland Browns have had in the last 10 years. So it's a reason for people to watch the Cleveland Browns do anything. So I think it's great. Why not? It's a team that's always been terrible for so long, and they have a very charismatic and headline-making new draft pick. So. Yeah, I think it's great. Why not have the Cleveland Browns in there?
I mean, I thought what Baker Mayfield said about it was pretty actually mature for him. For a guy that a lot of people question his maturity, what he said about it was pretty impressive. He made, what was it exactly that he had said? Hard Knocks wouldn't be there if we weren't 0-16 last year, so we're working towards having to have that situation again. I'm looking forward to being a start of something new there in Cleveland. Just basically, he's not really talking much about being on. He's basically saying, we know that they're going to try to start storylines, but we just have to focus on what's going on the field, which I actually kind of really like. I like that from the young kid.
Yeah, I think that's great coming from him. Obviously, if you're good enough, that's part of it. If you're good enough, you're exempt from having to be on Hard Knocks. If you have a bad record, if you're one of those teams that have a bad record, you're kind of open yourself up for that. Like, look, you guys aren't good enough to turn this down yet. So I think it's great, coming from somebody who obviously people are going to be looking at as a leader in the future, and when you're coming at it from that viewpoint, not some young kid coming straight out of college saying, yeah, it's going to be great to be on TV, and to have all this attention. It's like, all right, hey, we still have a lot of work to do. We know that this is going to be a distraction, but, we're here for a reason. We're looking to get ourselves out of it. So, I think that's great. I'm right with you.
I'm interested to see what they do with Josh Gordon and the fact that he'll be back now, which will be fun. The quarterback battle between Mayfield and Tyrod Taylor obviously will be nice. I don't know why. I get it. They're so bad. Baker Mayfield is great. They've got good storylines, but I tell you, I would have loved to have seen Pittsburgh. I think that would have been a lot of fun. Antonio Brown, Le'Veon Bell, Ben Roethlisberger.
Oh.
That would have been a lot of fun. I mean, maybe
I think
the Giants. I don't know.
Giants would have been good too. You would have had really had a really interesting dynamic there with Eli Manning, and then with of course Odell Beckham Jr. and then Saquon Barkley. I mean that you have your quarterback, your running back, and your wide receiver. So I think that would have been
Garoppolo, John Lynch could have been fun. You'll never get it, but I think everybody would. If you get the choice, I think everybody would pick the Patriots just to get a little peek behind the curtain.
Yeah, I agree, but even if the Patriots were to be on it, I think you'd still get so much less from the Patriots on that show than anybody else. You'd
Bill
get
Belichick
those
doing this stuff. Yeah, can't really say anything. Much.
Yep, you'd get him breaking down film with Tom Brady for 2 minutes every episode, and then the rest of it would be, Gronk on a party boat or something like that.
That'd be fun. One former Cleveland Brown who is a former, top first-round draft pick of the Cleveland Browns who didn't pan out like most of them. Johnny Manziel signing a 2-year deal with the Hamilton Tiger Cats of the Canadian Football League over the weekend. Said, I don't want to wait around anymore. I want a chance to get on the field and get into the locker room and get a chance to play ball again. This isn't just a pit stop for me. I'm not coming here to get what I need to go back down to the NFL. I've signed this for the long haul for 2 years. I'm here to make the most of it. So he sounds like he's going to play there for 2 years. I like how he says the long haul for 2 years. He barely played 2 years in the NFL, so he should know.
Right.
I think it's a good thing for him. I'm excited. I would love to see him play, and you're going to get a lot more CFL highlights on SportsCenter and all those other shows and things like that. So good for Johnny to get back there, for a team to take a chance on him. And I'll be honest, if he's got his head right, I love redemption stories and second chance opportunities. And if this kid's got his head right, he's got a chance to be really something fun to watch. Maybe not special, but something fun to watch at least.
Yeah, and this gives him the opportunity to really be what NFL teams want him to be, and that's really all about football because it's the CFL. You're not going to be making a ton of money. You're not going to be making these huge headlines. Nobody's going to be looking for you to make the dollar signs after a touchdown.
Right.
This is about him playing football, and if he wants to get back into it, and and if he's in it for the long haul for 2 years, I can't imagine that if an NFL team comes knocking after year one, he's going to say no. I'm in the long haul for one more year here with Hamilton. But I'm with you. I love the story. I love a redemption story. I'd really like for Johnny Manziel to do well because having all that natural talent and ability and seeing that go to waste, in his early to mid-20s, it's disappointing. It's disappointing to see someone not make the absolute most out of their God-given ability. So I would love to see Johnny Manziel do well in Canada.
Would be nice, and it'd be a lot of fun to see. So Johnny Manziel's got a new job, and Terrell Owens is wondering how Jason Garrett still has his job, which is, kind of, I don't know why T.O. needs to be saying these type of things. I guess he's still sour about his time in Dallas, but he's a Hall of Famer. And I honestly, it's not often that I agree with Terrell Owens, but I kind of I've been baffled that Jason Garrett still has his job. I understand he's the second, I didn't know this until, just now, but he's the second winningest coach in Cowboys history behind Tom Landry. Second longest tenured coach. He's been there since 2010, signed a 5-year deal in 2014, so this will be the 4th year of that 5-year deal. But he's 68-55, and the Cowboys, just for whatever reason, in games they shouldn't lose, they don't seem to be playing football. I don't know what it is, and I think I really do firmly believe a lot of the Cowboys' issues come with Jason Garrett.
I would agree, and I would say that, and I think this might sound weird, but I think a lot of that comes from Jerry Jones, and I think he's too loyal to.
And he loves his quarterbacks. He loves his former, he loves Troy Aikman, loved Tony Romo. You saw how hard he tried to hold on to Tony Romo to still play. We're waiting for Tony to be back. Tony will be around soon. Jason Garrett was Troy Aikman's backup. He wore that star as a quarterback. He loves these guys. I don't get it.
Yeah, it's for somebody who's such a, who's renowned as a businessman, and somebody who with his first action as the Dallas Cowboys owner is fire Tom Landry. The first thing he does is like, well, this guy's gone. This legend is gone. And ever since, he hangs on to everyone. And as you said it, Tony Romo, I think he hung on to Tony Romo way too long.
Yeah.
And but I'm not. It's difficult. It's really difficult to think about, because Jason Garrett, his record hasn't been great with Dallas, but there have been strong points with the Cowboys where it's like, all right, this guy definitely has coaching ability, and you can point to some of those issues to some players, and not just coaching decisions. So I think Garrett has done just enough. He's done just enough not to get himself fired, and he did just enough before that long contract extension. And yeah.
The last 2 years, though, to me have been baffling, because you've got Ezekiel Elliott, who's one of the best running backs in the game. You've got the best offensive line in the game, and Dak Prescott, who isn't a great thrower. He's serviceable, but he's also a great, he shouldn't be throwing the ball 45 times a game. He shouldn't.
No.
You should be behind that offensive line with Ezekiel Elliott, and their defense is good enough to keep teams off the field, run the ball. Like, I understand this is a passing league now and it's a quarterback-driven league, but the teams that win championships are the teams that control the clock, and you control the clock by running. It's not that difficult. And Jason Garrett's play calling has been, I think, the biggest issue that the Cowboys have had over the last 2 years. And if they don't get it right this year, he's going to go into his fifth year of that contract, probably knowing that it's going to be his last year with Dallas. At least I would think that.
I would think that too, and we'll see what the chemistry is with the Cowboys now, because they let go of Dez, and we'll see where that goes. And I think the only way that I can justify Jason Garrett's play calling is that the more you run the ball, the more you take the ball away from a natural playmaker in Dak Prescott. So you have a guy that can drop back and that can make some plays with his feet. So you have that, you have those two dimensions, somebody that can let go of the ball and somebody that can run. Yeah, I absolutely agree with the play calling, because I think the play calling has been horrendous. I think I'm in the same boat with everybody on that one. But the only way that I can justify that and be on Garrett's side is you're taking the ball away from another natural playmaker in Dak Prescott.
Yeah, and I understand you've got, you had Jason Garrett, you had Jason Witten, you had Dez Bryant. So I can see that point there. But this will be an interesting year for Jason Garrett in Dallas now, to see what he does from that standpoint. One final thing before we close up shop here on this Monday, May 21st. Christian Eimel, Keith Haney here in the Cheap Seats on the Public House Media Network. It's our Mojo Monday, Keith, as we do every single week, whether it's good mojo or bad mojo. We've all got it. Somebody's got more of it than others. So we try to bring those to light. Who do you got today for your Mojo Monday?
I don't think you can get any better good mojo than J.J. Watt. And we all heard the news on Friday. There was another school shooting. And with 10 people passing away in that, and it's terrible news. And every time we hear something like this, it's always awful. And you think to yourself, how can anything good come from this? And it's not good, but it's something that J.J. Watt is doing, and he has offered to pay for the 10 funerals for those gunned down in the Santa Fe High School shooting. And so he's really using his platform to the best of his ability. We all remember that he helped raise more than $37 million for those affected by Hurricane Harvey. And now, after another tragedy, he's stepping up again, and he's offering to pay for the funerals of those that passed away in the shooting. So it's not really a fair ending by any means, but
Right.
you have somebody that could easily just say, look, not my problem, not my
Give
deal.
some nice wishes on social media and that be it.
Exactly. You could, exactly. You could put out a nice tweet and have that be it. You could get a couple of million retweets, but J.J. Watt is saying, look, I got to do something.
Yeah.
It's not, it's going to help, so J.J. Watt, all the good mojo for him.
He might be one of the best humanitarians we have, the best humanitarian we have in sports right now. He's unbelievable. So good on him. Love it. Well done for the first Mojo Monday for you, sir. I'm going to go. We didn't really talk any baseball today, and that's rare when I'm on the microphone, at least, so we don't talk baseball. So I'm going to go with some guys on the field who've got some great mojo, and that is my Boston Red Sox, even though they have been struggling to hold back the Yankees right now, mainly Mookie Betts and J.D. Martinez, 15 home runs each, tied for the Major League lead. The first time in the Red Sox storied history that they have two players with 15 home runs by the end of May. First time in their history that they have had that. And then Mookie Betts also, by the way, leading the major leagues in runs scored. J.D. Martinez second in RBIs. He's right up there in batting average. Mookie Betts leads. They rank first and third in batting average. Betts leading the league in batting average. And they're just so talented guys right there and really helping everything for these Boston Red Sox to maintain their pretty solid stretch so far.
Yeah, I love the Red Sox in the American League. I have two teams. I obviously have the Cubs with my wife being involved with them, but the Red Sox, I've always loved the Red Sox in the American League, and I think baseball is better when you have teams like the Red Sox and I'm going to say it, the Yankees.
Yeah,
when you have those two
you.
teams, when you have those two teams at the top of the division as they are right now, I think that makes baseball so much more interesting to watch. So I'm really interested to see how both of these teams do down the stretch, and hopefully we can get some magic in October from both of them.
It's a lot of fun to watch, and it should be fun to see all that. Well, Keith, we appreciate you joining us here on Monday. We look forward to having you on the Wednesday show here in just a couple weeks. It'll be great to have you as a regular host on Wednesdays with Max.
Yeah, I'm excited to be a part of it. I've listened to the show for a while now, and you guys have done great. So it's really exciting for me to be a part of the show in more of a full-time capacity. But it was great to come on now and talk some sports with you as a fill-in role. But it'll be great to be a part of.
Looking forward to it. Don't forget, you guys can always check us out Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, a brand new show. Subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, iHeartRadio, TuneIn Radio, Spreaker.com, and, of course, thephmedia.com. You can also, on thephmedia.com, get yourself some awesome Cheap Seats gear, any podcast gear, Coffee with Keith and Katie, which you can have there, Press Row on Thursdays with me. A lot of fun stuff there on thephmedia.com. Don't forget to go to our Facebook page, The Cheap Seats by Public House Media. Vote on the poll question, most thankless job, jockey or caddy for a championship contender. It's been a lot of fun. Thank you so much for joining us here on this Monday in The Cheap Seats.